Before we begin, here's how to earn continuing professional education credit for attending this session. Gain valuable insights by attending the podcast, then complete the assessment test to download your certificate. To do this, follow these simple steps. Click on the link in your description to access the session. Create a free account and attend the podcast. After the podcast, take the assessment test and download your certificate. It's easy, and it's free. We highly recommend checking out our subscription. Let's get started.
Now I think now would be a perfect time to touch on the psychological safety point, because like I said, that's a point that I really want to address here. So let's talk about what the leaders can do to reverse this trend of fear and everything. So like what are the small but powerful
Yeah,
behaviors that help staff feel safe enough to speak up?
right. Well, one of my colleagues is Doug Conant, who
Okay.
was the CEO of Campbell Soup for many years. You
Oh,
know Campbell Soup,
yeah,
right?
yeah, obviously, yeah, yeah.
And Doug wrote a book called Leadership Blueprint. He did, I think he exhibited leadership qualities that applied when he was doing it, and they apply today. He literally walked the company and talked to people, talked to your staff, know people's names, or as many as you could. Doug made it his business he did handwritten cards on so many occasions to thank people, to acknowledge them, to let people know that they're not just a number, that they
Mm.
matter. I mean, I did a TEDx talk in 2022, and I talked about the 4 things that staff wants most, and that is respect, belonging, fair compensation, and to be supported to keep growing and learning.
Yes.
Um, During the pandemic, there was so much fear and anxiety. I told you about the leader who would just randomly pick up the phone and say,
Yes.
Saul, hey, it's the CEO. How are you? How's the family? You need
Yeah.
anything?
Welcome back to another episode of your favorite podcast we're trying to figure out. I'm your host, Saul. Today's conversation is a meaningful one for any leader who believes culture is more than perks and ping pong tables. We are talking about the hard stuff, what your staff really thinks but doesn't always say. Joining me is someone who has been on the front lines of these dynamics, Bonnie Low-Kramen. Bonnie is a workplace expert, author of Staff Matters, and a former personal assistant to Oscar winner Olympia Dukakis. She spent decades listening to what staff are really saying behind the scenes. And today, she's sharing those insights with us. Welcome, Bonnie, to the show.
Thank you, Sal. It's great to be here and to know that you want to talk about culture, which is so important in 2025.
Absolutely. It's more needed today than ever, and I'm glad that, the industries are reaching to that point wherein they're giving an ear to it, more than just a check mark item on their yearly checklists. Right.
Yeah.
So, and for all our viewers who are listening in, for CP credits of this podcast, you can visit mycpe.com/podcast, and you can always listen to this podcast on the go by downloading our MyCP One app, which is available on Android and iOS. And with that, let's jump right into the podcast. Bonnie, your journey is so unique, from backstage in theater to front and center in global workplace conversations. So let's start there. What drew you into the world of staff advocacy, and how did Staff Matters come to life?
It's nothing about my journey was planned or mapped out, Saul. My work, I was a personal assistant working with Olympia Dukakis. Neither one of us thought that it would last for 25 years, but it just kept going because she had a need, I had a need, and we worked very, very well together. So we were a living, breathing example of a strategic business partnership. where we complemented one another. A few years into my work with Olympia, though, I began getting asked to speak to different groups about the work I was doing as a celebrity assistant and how it related to corporate world. And what I realized in those meetings is that I would speak honestly about how it really was. I would try to pull the curtain back on the reality of the work. And inevitably, after the presentation was over, I would get executive assistants coming to me and telling me their stories about how there was a lot of fear in the workplace. There was bullying, there was sexual harassment. I mean, stories, Saul, that you simply can't make up, that would make your jaw drop, some of these stories. And I realized I needed to do something about what was really happening. So, one CEO used a phrase, there's what's happening on the front channel in businesses and in companies, and then there's what's happening on the back channel. The thing that everybody knows is going on, but very few people want to talk about because there's a lot of fear of backlash, fear of repercussions. And since the pandemic, it's gotten even more complicated to expose what some of the trickier challenges are because of the remote and hybrid workplace. If it was difficult enough having a tricky or difficult conversation face to face in person, trust me, it's not a whole lot easier. It's not any easier over a webcam, right?
True.
Perhaps you've had that experience.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
No,
so
I agree to you.
so I wrote one book, Be the Ultimate Assistant, about my time at Olympia, and then that led years into it to wanting to write a book about the entire workplace, about the different constituencies in the workplace, including leaders, assistants, HR professionals, recruiters, business school professors. Those groups I view as the constituencies of the entire workplace globally. And my goodness, what I see in 2025 is that those groups, none of them alone can fix what's broken, that we must figure out ways to work in collaboration with one another.
True. Yep. What's striking to me is, how often this workplace dysfunction, it stems not from malice, but just silence. People are not feeling safe to speak up, so
Correct.
and post pandemic, more importantly, like you pointed out, how it has become more difficult. So how have you seen the communication gap widen, especially in this hybrid and remote settings?
Well, that's it. We have staff who feel invisible if they're not going on webcam, if they're not speaking up, and they're literally hundreds, thousands of miles away from the office. It has become the role of leaders to be able to find ways to bridge those gaps with their staff. During the pandemic, there were some really vivid examples of leaders who stepped up, leaders who simply had their staff give them lists of names and phone numbers of the staff, and they would get phone calls from the CEO to simply
Nice.
say, how are you? How are you doing? How's the family? How are the kids? Like, during the pandemic, there was so much fear and anxiety and
Yes.
stress that in the end, we're all human beings in this
Yes.
workplace. And even though we're living in a time where there's all this talk about AI and high technology, the bottom line is we're still humans trying to make sense of all of this proliferation of technology and learning how to use these tools. We cannot skip over personal aspect of the workplace. And, these toxic work environments are happening not only because of the physical distance between us, but because of the stress and anxiety of the workplace, that people tend to act out when stress levels are very high. And there's a lot of uncertainty about about how to proceed, how much money to invest in AI. Do we lay off people? Do we hire more people? Leaders, the truth is that the leaders don't have all the answers right now. And I believe that the staff is the key to moving forward in the future in a more stable way. And that means tapping their talents and skills, leveraging their SME, their subject matter expertise. Everybody at a company was hired for at least one reason, but probably many reasons. And one of the common complaints I hear globally is that many staff feel under-leveraged and underutilized.
Perfect.
Chapter 4 of Staff Matters is called Ask First. How about we ask our staff their opinions, what they think about certain things that are going on? What I tell leaders is, I promise you, they have opinions if only given the chance to reveal them.
True.
Most staff, unless they feel safe, if staff feels safe, they will tell you everything. But if
Yeah.
staff feels unsafe, if they're
Yeah.
walking around frightened and terrorized in fear of, like being wrong, making a mistake, they will tell leaders nothing, or what they feel like they're wanting to hear. And that's not serving leaders who may be sitting thousands of miles away, making decisions that are costing money. And I believe they're often making those decisions without full information, because who
True.
has that full information is the staff.
Do you want to earn CPE credit? Take this course of MyCPE 1 to earn free credit. Click the link in the description to get started.
It's true. It's true. In fact, the staff can actually open the leader's eyes to a lot many perspectives that you cannot just see from there. And you're touching on a very interesting point of psychological safety, which we'll get to shortly. I definitely want to talk on that. It's a topic that's also very dear to me. But before we get there, you have spoken to so many people on the front end. You've spoken to so many staff, and so what are the staff really expecting now that might surprise the leaders?
They are wanting fair rules.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that is chasing many staff away are double standards and rules that are applied to some but not all.
I love
And
it.
if leaders don't think that the staff sees it and knows it, when there's, persistence to the wage gap, women making less than men, and it's not only about gender, but simply, some rules that are applying to the remote staff versus, like how some could work hybrid and others cannot. The
Yes.
thing that is demoralizing and disengaging for staff is when they experience rules that don't make sense.
Yeah.
That a blanket policy, for example, Saul, that everybody's got to come in 5 days a week. That's it. Everybody's in 5 days without context. And then, I'll have assistants say to me, so I did it, I followed the rules, and I go in and there's nobody there. Nobody saw me. Like, why? Why am I having to go in and spend all this time on the commute, blah, blah, blah. It's maddening to them. And so some companies have a more prudent policy, which is called presence with a purpose.
Yes.
Now, staff can understand that. They can understand if they're presence with a purpose. Everybody gets that there's value in coming together in person. They need to be treated like adults, respected for the role that they hold, what they were hired to do, and handled professionally and respectfully. That's what they want. That's all even more important than money, frankly. Although
Yeah.
money is very important, it's not number one. Being respected and acknowledged for the role they have is number one.
Absolutely. Look, um, we all as human beings have got roles in the society. So that's why we are doing what we are doing. But together with that, there's a lot more human thing than a mechanical aspect to it. Otherwise, those things could have been done by something mechanical like a robot or something that could have been doing it. There's a
Indeed.
reason why we are doing it, right? And with us being humans, there's a lot that comes onto the plate than just ensuring that you're getting paid on time, right? It's much more than that. And you talked about rules. I would so curiously want to know. I'm sure a lot of people would have told you so many weird rules that they must have heard in their offices, which they think is just makes no sense. In fact,
Yeah.
give me one or two that you can remember.
Well, okay. So some companies have elaborate dress codes. And,
Whoa.
we are living in a time when, given a chance, some people will go on airplanes in pajamas and
Yeah.
slippers and, what some might term as inappropriate wear.
Yes. Yeah.
Mary Barra, who is the CEO of General Motors,
Right.
she has a 4-word dress code.
Whoa.
Dress for your day.
Nice.
She wants to treat the staff as adults, and if they are client facing, to dress that way. And if they are not going to be seeing anybody, they should make a decision about how they should show up. But um, staff are really bucking up against the micromanagement. And so I have to say that I really admire Mary Barra for having done that. So that's an example.
Yeah, I mean, very interesting. And you mentioned about dress code. You know, very simple. Dress for the day. Very, very simple and very effective.
Right?
It also makes
Presence with purpose,
presence with
dress for your
purpose.
day.
Dress for the day. You're also making the message across that you're letting them know that I know you are an adult, so you should get the message very loud
Right.
and clear, right?
Yes.
So I mean, I remember this dress code policy I had in one of my companies. I think it was one of the brilliant policies. I don't know whether they copied it
What's
from,
that?
but their dress code policy was anything that you can wear to a beach or to a DJ party or disco, please don't wear that in the office. I was like, oh, that kind of makes a lot of sense. All right. Because
Yeah.
it's very simple. They just said it what you wear there, things that you can wear in certain places. If you don't wear those things and come anything
Right.
apart from that, and it kind of makes it easier for everybody. When you're picking those clothes, you're like, oh, I usually wear this there. I usually wear this there, so I would not pick on those. So then you know what you need to wear. It's very easy.
Right. And
Right.
that's about the culture of a company. And much of that is revealed on the websites of companies. And
Yes.
so, I encourage anyone and everyone, if you're curious about the culture of a company, you often need not do much more than go on the website and look at the images that are being used, read the language that is being used, and about what it means to work in that company. And you can tell a lot. I have students who say, if I'm considering working for a company, if I don't see anybody on that website who looks like me, then I believe I'm not welcome. It's very interesting, right, Saul?
Very interesting. Very, very interesting. And now that you talk about it, that is very thought provoking, to all the leaders who are actually listening in. Maybe they've not really
Yeah.
paid that much attention to what really goes on onto the social media.
Right.
Everything is on the social media. I mean, it's a natural response. If somebody is even thinking about joining your company, the very first thing they do is this look you up on the internet. And
100%. And what I tell leaders is one of the fastest ways to understand if you're doing it right in your company in terms of culture is find out the answer to this question. Are your current employees referring their friends and their relatives to work at your company? People will not refer the people they love and like a lot to their company if things aren't going well, if this isn't a place where you want, would you want your child to work here? Would you want your sister to work here? What do you think about that, Saul?
Wow. Now that you make me think
Right?
about it, see, these are things that are there at the back of my mind of every staff, because there are referral
Yes.
policies in almost every company has it. But then, as an employee, you're like, okay, there's a referral policy, great. I refer somebody, the person gets hired, I'll
Yeah.
probably get some commission or whatever is the benefit of it, right? But then I'm like, why am I not referring that person? Because I know somebody who could
Exactly.
exactly fit into that role. You come
Mm-hmm.
across a job position and you're like, I know somebody could exactly fit into this role, but why am I not referring somebody else? And that's when it clicks in that, oh no, I mean, there it's this unsaid things that goes on in your head, and you're like, oh no, I would rather not want to have him
Right.
here.
And the best leaders are the ones who make it their business to find out why that is happening or why that isn't happening. You know, that will tell them that's when they need to make it safe. And I learned this lesson a long, long time ago, having started with Olympia Dukakis and as an employee, and perhaps this feeling, Saul, of being in a situation and like, oh, I have something to say, but should I
Yeah,
speak up? Should I tell them what I think? And Olympia sensed early on that I was reluctant to say, to be the messenger, as it were.
yeah,
And she said, Bonnie, I may not always agree with you, and I may not always do what you say, but I always want to know what you think.
yeah,
And that, I'll never forget her saying that to me, because that opened the door for me to be free, to be safe, to make a mistake, to be wrong, to tell her, well, this is what I see, and to take the risk of her saying, well, I hear you, but I'm going to do it this other way because, the smartest leaders are the ones who give not only the content of what's needed, but the context, the why. Why are we making this decision? Why is this a red alarm fire? Why does this need to be done by tomorrow? Why do you need to be in 5 days a week when 3 days a week could do the job? Why? We need to respect our staff to tell them why.
Access latest and trending CPE courses with my CPE One Unlimited Access subscription. Subscribe now.
I agree to you. In fact, these are the unspoken truths. The unspoken truths that is actually coming out through this podcast. And I pray that through this podcast, it is able to shine that light on a lot of leaders, and probably also a place where a lot of employees would come and they would be like, oh, finally, somebody's saying what we wanted to say.
Paul, that's what I hope too. That's why I wrote Staff Matters, because
Yeah.
I wrote the book that I wished was in my bookcase that I
Hmm.
didn't have. That,
Yeah.
I got a chance to ask HR professionals, for example, what is it that you wish people knew about HR professionals that you don't think they know? I wanted to hear the unspoken truths, because those are the things that are preoccupying us and slowing us down and stopping us dead in our tracks.
True.
Those are the things, you catch someone in a lie, or someone who somewhat sabotaged you. A person cannot do great work when they're distracted by things like that. Now, can a leader have their finger on the pulse of all of that? No, but that's why middle managers that need to be excellent communicators. This post-pandemic workplace, the hybrid world, the remote world, some people are loving it, the loving work from anywhere work
Yeah.
style. But I don't know if you saw it, but just this last week, Microsoft did a study and they came up with a new phrase. It's called infinite workday. And it 21 there's been a 21% increase in the number of people who are working hybrid and remote, who live in a different time zone, where they're starting their meetings at 6 a.m. in their time zone. And sometimes those meetings, they get to do whatever they do during their day, but they're then still doing meetings at 8 p.m. their time. It's called
Oh,
infinite workday. And I got to tell you, I'm concerned.
yeah.
Even if they're doing it happily, the people who were able to go to their kids' baseball game or, pick them up from school or whatever, still, we're human beings doing work at 6 a.m. and at 8 p.m. That's a long day. What do you have
That is
thoughts
a
about
really
that?
long day. Look, even if you took breaks between the day, maybe you took some time off to maybe drop your kids
Yeah,
to school or whatever, but still, it's a really long,
still,
right?
right. And I think that's a fact that leaders need to get onto right now, and understand, like, new policies regarding culture have to be set. So, some companies are setting policies such as no meetings Thursdays,
Yes.
like whole days when there are no meetings. I think the hybrid workplace and the remote workplace is here to stay in certain companies. So what are we going to do about that? About the
Mhm.
humans that are involved in this structure? And I think we need to get onto it, and that's why I love coming onto podcasts like yours to expose this reality where, on one hand, if a staffer lobbied to work, in a whole different time zone, they're probably going to be reluctant to go back to their leaders and say, this isn't working for me.
Yeah.
It's a tricky balance,
It is a
and
tricky balance.
that's fairly new, and I admit I'm deeply concerned about where we're
Well,
headed with it.
well, and what has really happened, or I think this has been something that has been consistent throughout, ever since the history of an employer and employee relationship,
Mm,
that, you know, oftentimes people just stay silent, you know, even if it
yes.
is impacting their job satisfaction, you know. Why do you think people do that?
Oh my gosh, fear. It's very fear-based. It's complicated. Um, in part, it's because business schools are still not teaching future leaders the nuances, the details about how to manage a staff. Business schools are very busy teaching microeconomics and international finance and accounting, very black and white subjects. But what they're not teaching very thoroughly is how to manage human beings. And then they get out of school and given ultimately a team to manage, and many of them are failing at it, and not knowing how to make it safe for people to speak to them. Um, so there's a lack of education. And then there's this very tumultuous workplace we're in. It's moved very quickly since 2019, and
True.
it was volatile after 9/11, and then it got more volatile with the financial meltdown in 2008.
Yes.
And then, my goodness, the pandemic threw absolutely everyone in a tailspin. The executive assistants of the world have been trying to, bring order to the chaos, but there's been so much
True.
volatility. And you can understand why leaders have been really stressed out and unsure about which way to
Yeah.
go. And HR departments have been, have a very big pressure put on them to bring some automation using AI. But you know what, Saul? How I see it is, it feels like we're all trying to build the plane as we're flying it.
Oh my God. Oh my God, that's a
What
very
do you?
terrible thought. I mean, that's very fearful. It's a very fearful thought, all right?
Well, we're paying the price. Like during the pandemic, we went through the Great Resignation. Remember that?
Oh yes,
We
yeah.
had
I
the Great
mean,
Resignation,
that was crazy. I
and
mean, millions
leaders
quit.
got to
Yeah.
so many. There was so much volatility, and so then the dust settled some, and now we're in the aftermath of that. And I don't mean to be pessimistic. Actually, I feel optimistic.
Mhm,
I'm still teaching my Be the Ultimate Assistant classes, and I have 20 somethings and 30 and 40 and 50s coming
mhm.
to get up to the minute information about how to proceed in this workplace. It's very different. And, back in the day, ongoing education was not always needed.
Yeah,
That is not the case any longer.
that is
Um,
not
Training,
true.
ongoing training, just like, Serena Williams, and in order to stay at the top of her tennis game, she had to train every day. The
True.
people of our workplace in 2025, in my view, need to be supported to be training on an ongoing basis. Not every day necessarily, but definitely on an ongoing basis. You can't just get hired and then expect to be at the top of your game without ongoing training. Just things are moving, things are too complicated and they're moving very fast.
Absolutely, they are. And now I think now would be a perfect time to like touch on the psychological safety point, because like
Mm,
I said, that's a point that I really want to address here. So let's talk about what the leaders can do to reverse
mhm.
this trend of fear and everything. So, like what are the small but powerful
Yeah,
behaviors that help staff feel safe enough to speak up?
right. Well, one of my colleagues is Doug Conant, who
Okay.
was the CEO of Campbell Soup for many years. Do you
Oh,
know Campbell Soup,
yeah,
right?
yeah, obviously, yeah, yeah.
And Doug wrote a book called Leadership Blueprint. He did, I think he exhibited leadership qualities that applied when he was doing it and they apply today. He literally walked the company and talked to people, talked to your staff, know people's names, or as many as you could. Doug made it his business he did handwritten cards on so many occasions to thank people, to acknowledge them, to let people know that they're not just a number, that they
Mm.
matter. I mean, I did a TEDx talk in 2022, and I talked about the 4 things that staff wants most, and that is respect, belonging, fair compensation, and to be supported to keep growing and learning.
Yes.
Um, During the pandemic, there was so much fear and anxiety. I told you about the leader who would just randomly pick up the phone and say,
Yes.
Saul, hey, it's the CEO. How are you? How's the family? You need
Yeah.
anything?
Yeah.
During the pandemic, there were CEOs who said, you know what? We're going to give everybody a $500 gift card and they can buy whatever they need to make their home office workable. Do they need another
Yes.
monitor? Do they need a light? Do they need a better chair? And then my son actually works for a company that 6 months in, they did it again. They gave everybody another $500 gift card and said, you know what? No strings attached. You take your whole family out to dinner if you want. Use that $500 for whatever it's going to do to make you feel, better. And we value you. Thank you so much for doing what you have to do through this crisis that we're in. But it's even more than that. During the pandemic, one of my students, her father passed away, and you remember what happened. Like people weren't gathering at funerals in a big way. Her CEO, they managed to have a small gathering for the funeral, and her CEO came to that funeral, and he showed up. Saul, we hear the term, how do you show up? He showed up. I mean, you got to know that was so meaningful for her.
True.
It's the ways in which we keep it personal that
Yep.
we, during the pandemic, and it applies now, CEOs were doing town halls,
Yes.
virtual town halls, where they said, okay, once a week, we're going to get together on Teams or Zoom, and we're just going to give you an update. And because there was a lot of fear, are we getting laid off? Is the company staying open? What are we doing?
Yeah.
And once a week, these leaders would get on, they would be visible and say, hey, we've made it another week. This is the situation. Things are not great here. The ones, what staff wants are for leaders to be authentic and vulnerable and accessible and
True.
trustworthy. That when they say we're discussing some new rules, some new policies about the remote hybrid workplace, and we want to float this by you. Let's have some conversation about it. You know,
You the
it,
key word,
like,
the key word when you talked about what leaders need to be, I think the very key word was vulnerable. That leaders also need to be vulnerable, right? They're not somebody who are just superhuman, that they don't need to even demonstrate themselves to be superhuman, who cannot be who
right.
cannot be faced with something that's happening. It's a very, very strong quality, and a quality that's often not displayed by a lot of leaders, you know, for whatever reasons, right? But I think it's a very, very
Well,
strong.
it's by some it's seen as weakness.
Uh-huh.
They interpret it as weakness, but it is not weakness. I mean, certainly the Professor Brene Brown has made a whole, livelihood on the subject of vulnerability, and she's a woman, right? But so men in general can view vulnerability as a weakness, but it is so not viewed that way by
True.
staff. So I suspect you have men and women watching you on this podcast, Saul,
Yes.
and to all of them, I say to choose to be vulnerable. I mean, Doug Conant, who I was just talking about, he has made it very common knowledge that he was fired once. He was completely taken aback when he was fired, but in retrospect, it was turned out to be a very positive thing. But while he was going through it, it was a very painful thing. I mean, frankly, in my classes, I sometimes ask, who in this room has ever been fired? And I'm one of those people. I was one time in my career. If that's ever happened to you, you never forget it. And wow, does that make you feel vulnerable?
And,
And human.
and human, exactly, because it reminds you to it reminds you of that time. That's something. It's a very beautiful memento that you carry on. It's a very beautiful memento that you carry on. And anyways, but we're talking about psychological safety, and how does that look like actually? How does psychological safety actually look like, either team meeting or a one-on-one?
It it means saying things like, putting down your device, not being distracted, and essentially communicating, you're the most important thing I'm doing right now,
Mhm.
and asking questions like, what do you think? Do you have an opinion about that? I really need to know. I'm very interested in what your thoughts are on this.
Yeah.
And I have a brief story that illustrates this point,
Go
if I
ahead.
may.
Go ahead.
Okay. So a fairly new manager told me this story. I was coaching him and he was getting ready to have his first annual review with his
Mhm.
executive assistant.
Mhm.
And it was all about the prep. And he came into the meeting and the assistant knew it was happening, and they sat down and he proceeded to talk about the past year and in detail the things that he felt were going really well and the things going forward, that the projects that he hoped they could work even better on. And
Mhm.
it was a conversation. It wasn't just, manager talking down to staff,
Yeah.
right? Then after that conversation, he said to her, now I'd like to know what you think about my performance as a manager. How can I help you better? What can I do that would just help you do your job? And how can I'd really welcome your opinion on how you think I could be a better manager, because I'm pretty new at this. He was being vulnerable. And she was pretty surprised by that question, but she answered him honestly, and they ended up, having great conversation. It was also about money. He revealed to her what her raise was going to be and when it would take effect. So it was all very transparent and honest, and the meeting was over. What he didn't tell her was that he also authorized a $500 performance bonus to go
Mhm.
into her paycheck, which was going to be a bit of a surprise when she got
Nice.
her next paycheck. A week
Nice.
later, she came to him and she said, first of all, I want to thank you for not only the raise, but I was really happy about that bonus that really helped me. She said, and I also need you to know that I received a job offer, and it's for more money than I'm making now, even with my raise. She said, but I'm not taking it. I'm not taking it because I have never had a manager like you. I've never had a manager ask me what I think about your performance, and I'm not leaving because I want to keep working for you.
I tell you a story myself. This has happened to me. All right.
Okay.
When I became a team lead many years back in some role that I had, I was once temporarily fired for not being a people's person. All right. Not being a good team player, not having good people management skills and everything.
You didn't smile enough, I'll bet.
Possibly, yes. That happened.
I,
But
I
but today the person that I've become because of that, when I hear people tell,
oh,
you know you're one of the best leaders. I mean, I have people whom I work with in prior companies who are still calling me and they would tell me that I've never had a manager like you, and they would use me as an example to tell others that, if you want somebody to look up to, that if you want an example of how a manager should be,
huh?
he's the guy, because this is what I learned from him, this is what you taught me. I subconsciously, but that moment made me to the person that I am today. And
Interesting.
look, I did end this vulnerability that I talked about. The reason why that word caught my eye was because that hit me there as well, but I accepted it
Yeah,
as a strength,
yeah,
not as a weakness, that it's okay to be vulnerable.
yeah. And may I ask you, Saul, what was one of your favorite ways to what's the thing that people would say, when you did that, that's why I think you were a great manager. Like,
Oh,
what,
for
can you
once,
think of something?
I mean, yeah, I even do it every day. Like, it's like
Oh,
it's part of me, when it's like, so Saul, I mean, obviously Saul is not my real name, but Saul is something that it's been stuck with me ever since I've been in the business. And Breaking Bad series made this very famous, Better Call Saul, because Saul Goodman is the one who solves problems. You got anything, you go to Saul.
uh,
And but even way many years before Breaking Bad, I was always Saul, Mr. Dependable, always approachable, who will never waste a moment to compliment anything good that you've done. He will appreciate it
uh,
right there. And that was something that I do it like day in, day out. Like, I never waste a moment to
mhm,
appreciate anything good that has happened, no matter how small, no matter how big. Make it a point, let them know, give them feedback, accept feedback, take criticisms, know that you could be wrong. If I've done
hmm,
something wrong, if I've said something wrong, and if somebody were to, they have that faith that they can actually walk into my cabin, or they can just like say, hey, Saul, you said this. I didn't quite like the way you said it. You could have said it better. And I'll take that up positively. I'll go, you're right. I will. Thank you for that. Because it's only through these feedbacks do I make a better version of myself. You know?
sure.
So
That's
that's what.
great. I don't know if you've ever shared that yet on the podcast, but that's really valuable advice when leaders hear those kinds of words. Like, how do you actually say that to somebody? And somebody might think, oh, well, that's revealing that I have a weakness. Well, you're human. That's okay. That's why
Yeah.
we need a staff, by the way, people. You know,
Yeah. That's why we
that's
need
why
that.
we need people
But
around us who are smart and who have skills that we don't have. It
true.
shouldn't, on one hand, I get frustrated because it shouldn't be this hard.
Mhm.
And then the other hand, I realize there are a lot of complicated issues in play, and that we need to cut each other a break. and just never lose sight of the personal nature of this workplace, that we can't skip over, we can't hurt somebody's feelings and then presume that they're not going to remember that people do remember when they are slighted and insulted, and they also remember when someone goes to bat for them. Just like you acknowledge people when things are going well, I suspect when someone makes a mistake, or when something goes wrong, I also suspect you have a way of handling it where you address it in a way that doesn't make people feel like they're terrible people.
There are two things that I do. When I have given something somebody and somebody is doing it, and even if if there was a failure on anybody's part, one is I look back to myself and I'm like, what part of me as a leader did I fail because of which that outcome happened? Because if there's somebody in my team, or if there's somebody whom I've given work and that did not work out, somewhere I failed because of which that did not come the way it was supposed to happen. All right. That's the first thing. And then obviously, when it has been wrong, I naturally don't just say that, okay, so why do you think this happened? No, I never do that. Maybe I was that person many years back, but I never said it. Okay, so this happened. Why do you think this happened? That is such a bad way to start a conversation. All right.
So what do you do? What do you say?
I simply tell them that, all right, so this happened. This is what, I think I should do if I was in your place, but I would want to know it more from you because you understand this better than me. So tell me, what can I do to make this better? I don't ask him to do it. I'm like, tell me, what can I do to make this better?
Interesting.
And
it works. And you've had really good
it works
experience
every
with
time.
that.
In fact, they feel more empowered, which they should, because that's what it is. They gotta feel that, all right, I'm empowered, I can give my say. It could also be that there was something that they had at the back of my mind, but they probably never just said it, or maybe they realized it during the journey of doing that work, that, oh wait, but it's just that because they're in the middle of it and they're getting it done, they're like, okay, I'll probably tell this later when everything has been done and delivered. They don't really look into the outcome, whether it was a success or a failure. They would rather just want to get it home. And then if it all has been a failure, they are more not, they don't want to say it, because they're like, I know that this could have happened because while I was doing it, this had come into my mind, but they don't want to. But when you give them that option, that, okay, tell me that. What was that revelation that came to you when you were doing it, because of which that this would happen? Tell it to me. What is it that I can do to make it better?
Right. And what I suspect also happens is that, because it's not if, it's when these things are going to happen. It's not if. So then there's going to be a next project that you're working on with that person. And I suspect that person will come to you far sooner when there's an issue for next time. These situations are cumulative in the workplace. And I deal with people all the time who've been doing their work for 10, 15, 20, 25 years. And it's, the institutional knowledge that people are walking around with is astonishing. And that should not be underestimated by leaders. It's not only what their people are doing, it's what they know and who they know. That is the superpower of the staff in the workplace, in my view.
Absolutely. Now, let's bring this from big ideas to the next steps, right? If a leader is listening and thinks, I don't want to lose people, but I don't know where to start, what should they do this week or whenever they're listening to this podcast?
I recommend, first of all, gathering the leadership team to understand from them. Help me understand if what I'm perceiving, what I'm seeing is accurate, and I need you to tell me the truth. Like he or she needs to set a climate of an expectation that people have an obligation to say the hard thing, to say the quiet parts out loud without fear of repercussion or retaliation. And then it is a matter of, I suggest for leaders to call in the key players. There's always staffers who have been there a long time, who have the inside track to people. Bring those people in one-on-one, have a coffee, have a lunch, whatever, and say, I need your help. I need your help to understand what's going on. That's a leader's golden resource, is the people who have their ear to the ground on what's really happening. And I promise you, they will tell you the truth if they feel that you're not telling on people, you're helping me. I mean, I heard a situation the other day where it sounded like junior high school, where one group of an assistant didn't like another assistant in another department, and so the leaders, the managers, were actually supporting them to not have any interaction. Like, what? It's so juvenile, and it's such a waste of time and money. And I listened to the story and I said, this is about poor leadership. The smartest leader would be pulling in those two executive assistants with their managers and to say, we need to clear the air right now. This is going to be over today. This is unacceptable. It's unacceptable. We all lived through high school and junior high, and the workplace should not be like that. But that tells me there's a lack of education, there's a lack of confidence on how to handle these tricky conflicts between human beings. And that's what I think is talk to people. You have to take the risk. We're all very busy texting and emailing, and really what's effective is pick up the darn phone and say, let's have a coffee. I need to see you.
And don't just do it once, make it a practice. Because otherwise it would look like
But they need to expect. They need to expect that this is a leader who's, like at Campbell's Soup, the staff never knew when Doug Conant was going to be at their door. And just say, hey, I hear it's your birthday today. Happy birthday. How you doing? What are you doing?
That's good.
That's even in these companies that are many thousands of people. What I understood from talking with Doug and talking with somebody like Hubert Joly, who was the CEO of Best Buy, the appliance company, Best Buy. I don't know if you've heard of it.
No, I have.
And he did the same thing. He went to the selling floor to talk with some people. Now, was he talking with all thousands of his employees? No, but the word goes around when, the comments from assistants who say, Bonnie, I can't believe the CEO actually knows my name. He called my name in a meeting. Like that simple human thing matters so much. And I think anybody listening, I would recommend asking yourself, would it matter to you? Would it matter to you if there's nothing more personal than your name. So it's not that hard. And even if you're in a huge company, these small acts go a long way, and the word goes around, doesn't it? Like the bad things fly around, but the really good things also get around to staff.
They do. Well, Bonnie, this has been eye-opening. But before we wrap up, and this is for the staff who's listening in, because I think they would really love to hear it from you. What's your advice to someone who is afraid to speak up?
A short story. One of my students said that she said, Bonnie, I can't speak up. I'm afraid I'm going to get fired. And I said, I'm afraid that if you don't speak up, you're going to lose you. We as humans are paying a huge price for staying quiet. Where, some people lose sleep. Some people get sick. Some people eat too much. They don't eat enough. They drink. They take drugs. We pay a price somehow for staying quiet, for keeping silent. And I've lived that. I'm speaking from personal experience, in addition to knowing hundreds of stories from all over the world, Saul. And so this is being said with love and respect, and it is to think long and hard about the price you're paying for staying in this situation. I can honestly say that 9 times out of 10, if it comes, I always recommend confronting before quitting. I'm never one to say, oh, just quit. Like, jobs are not that plentiful that we do that, without much thought. That's a lose-lose situation. I
True.
do think there are very positive confrontations to say, get someone one-on-one and say, we need to have a conversation about what just happened in the staff meeting. No one talks to me like that. And it's not productive for us to be talking like that to one another. And that must end today. We
True.
need a new way. And I want to talk about that with you. That's one of the things I teach in my class. We must break the silence, because the future will not change. None of us are fine with the status quo. So if that's true, the only way to change the status quo is to take some kind of action. And sometimes that means putting an email in writing. When it's a bullying situation, a lot of experts say, oh, go straight to HR. And to which I say, no, don't go straight to HR, because very often HR, whoever, may not be equipped, may not know how to do it. I
True.
think it's much better one-on-one to say, Saul, you and I need to talk about us. We need to talk about our business partnership here. That's my best advice for staff. And I can tell you it works.
It
But it
does.
takes courage. It definitely
does
takes
take courage.
courage and support.
Yeah. In fact, I had a couple of years back, there was a speaker, Sandra Ford Walston, she's the courage expert, and she used to speak on it. She used to speak on this, and she was a very strong advocate on this. She also continues to speak even today, but she's now retired and she's now enjoying her life. But I clearly remember her webinars. They were very, a lot of people used to attend those webinars because a lot of people needed that. And this was happening during the pandemic. So you can imagine.
Yeah.
But thank you, Bonnie. Thank you for sharing your insights. And this
You're
podcast has
welcome.
been it's been very thought provoking. Your book title, I guess it says it all. Staff matters, and I think that more leaders are realizing this, that this is not just an HR issue; it's a strategy issue. So thank you for being here. And to all our listeners, Bonnie's book and the TEDx talk that we spoke about, both are a must check out resource, which I will have it linked into the show notes. And if you want to bring these conversations into your own company, reach out to her. She's not just insightful, but she's practical. So, Bonnie, for all those people who want to get in touch with you, what is the quickest way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, I'm the easiest person to find. LinkedIn is a great vehicle, Bonnie Low-Kramen, and my website is my name, bonnielowkramen.com. There are plenty of resources on both places.
Right.
I have 7 grandkids and one on the way, Saul, and I want to affect positive change in the workplace, not only for us and for the current staff, but for the kids, for the young people who will be in the workplace a decade from now, for your children and grandkids and for everybody listening. We have an opportunity to make change right now. Times of change are times of opportunity. And so this
Yes.
is a wonderful time to make the changes in our workplaces so that we're at least aware of the infinite workday and come up with a plan about what to do about that, as one example. So I welcome questions and comments and connection with people who care about these issues as well. So thank you, Saul.
Well, yep. Thank you. Thank you, Bonnie. Thanks once again for joining us. And To everyone who is listening in, if this episode got you thinking, and I know it did, please share it with someone in your company who influences culture. So, with that, this is it for this episode of We're Trying to Figure Out. And today, I think we figured out a little more about what really makes teams work. And with that, thank you so much all for tuning in. Until next time, take care and keep innovating in everything that you do. Cheers.
Access latest and trending CPE courses with my CPE One Unlimited Access subscription. Subscribe now